Welcome to Tangle Talks. I'm your host Shubham Das, and today we have with us a published author, a film director, a mechanical engineer, and he's not even 20 yet. Welcome to the podcast, Sushant. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Shivam. It's a very generous introduction. I feel really great being here. Thank you for having me here. Really. Yeah.
Great. So today we're going to talk about how you got started with your first novel. How was the whole publishing journey? What happened after? All the things you have learned throughout the journey, all the knowledge you want to share, and how can our listeners start their own author journey, start publishing a book, and make the next bestseller. So, that being said, where did it all start? Because I remember you said that it started like you were just bored one day in quarantine, and skip 1 year later, you're a published author. So, is it that simple, or like did it start? Where are the grassroots?
Uh, it's actually that simple. It's just that there's this character that I always picture in my mind. He was a wing commander who lived in the 1930s, and he's facing a midlife crisis. And I always used to read a lot of history books. So I think that played a huge influence my writing journey as well. And thing is, engineering in NIT is not simple,
Mhm.
considering the curriculum. And first year, especially, is a lot of pressure. So you don't really have
Right,
time to focus on creative activities such as writing.
right.
But when we were in lockdown, I had nothing but creative activities going on, and writing was one such creative activity. And during my lockdown, I just sat and wrote every day, all the time. So that's where I think it all began. Again, Jin Oliver, the character, was just an idea, but
Right.
the the push to truly materialize that
Mhm.
character and bring it out in words took place during the coronavirus lockdown.
That's amazing. So, in a way, you credit this pandemic for kind of bringing out the inner writer within you and actualizing it into a book. That's really cool to
Uh,
hear.
that was a
So,
silver lining, yeah.
of course, every dark cloud has that silver lining. Now, another interesting thing. So, you spoke about how you read a lot of history books, you were very interested in that subject, and how you always, this character in your protagonist of your book, always had this, was a figment of your imagination. You have always developed that character in passive thought. Could you just give us a bit of insight on your novel, what the general story is, and what the themes and the genre are?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it's about. So the thing is, like I told you, history is one of my favorite subjects. Ironically, I started liking history only after I graduated from 10th. Once I was done with CBSE, that's when I actually started liking history.
Right,
And the thing is, the period 1930s was a very it was really fragile. It was on thin ice because World War One had just ended, and
right,
countries were just waiting for an opportunity to attack each other.
right.
And in fact, you'll see so many contemporary novels based on this period.
Correct.
And my novel is one such fiction. And
Hmm.
what happens is, and after the coronavirus began, I kind of got interested into reading about mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and
Right.
psychosis disorder. So I started researching about that topic. I spoke to
Hmm.
psychiatrists. I took
Right.
notes. I spoke with patients, and it's mind blowing. It's really mind blowing how illnesses can completely uh, ruin your perception of reality and
Right.
put them at a position where they're completely unsure of what's real and what's not.
Right.
So
But there's this interesting story I think we discussed once while we were talking about how many of these doctors and psychiatrists you approached thought that there was something wrong with you and thought that
yeah,
this whole novel thing was just some kind of lie you were trying to pull off. So can you just tell us about that story on how
yeah.
the research part of it went around?
I remember there was one psychiatrist who I gained maximum most of my knowledge from. He was a doctor in Kerala, and I called him up one evening and I told him that I'm writing a novel. He said, "Okay, cool." He didn't expect that, first of all, because
Hmm.
engineering. And
Right.
I told him I'm writing a novel. He said, "Cool, that's fine." It's about a guy who's hearing voices in his mind, and he plays the guitar. I play the guitar, and he's hearing voices in his mind. He's hearing a wing commander from 1930s giving him orders. He feels like he's being spied on by a burgeoning fascist syndicate from the 1930s. And I was speaking to him, and he was getting more and more skeptical. And then he asked me, and then he told me he was giving me advice. I was asking him about the symptoms of schizophrenia, and he was giving me advice as if I had schizophrenia. He thought me writing a novel was just an alibi, and I wanted to actually get uh, medical opinions from him. I was shy to tell him that I was schizophrenic, and that's clearly what I want to focus on. People are shy today. It's stigmatized in
Right.
society, and that's one of the main reasons why I want to highlight on this issue.
So that's really amazing. Through one book, you're not just talking about history, you're not just talking about your passion about what happened in the 1930s, but you're also talking about a very relevant issue today, which is about mental illnesses. And you have done your thorough research, as you just said. You have spoken to a lot of medical professionals. So, Sushan, let's get to something interesting. While you're writing a book, especially one about which has things to do with history and with medical science, you need to make sure that your facts are right. You cannot go out there and say something which is factually incorrect. So how do you make sure, you as an author, right, you're not a PhD in medical science or not a PhD in history, you as an author and anybody else wants to start writing a book on some of these factual topics, what are the best practices to make sure that you're always in the right?
Okay, so the thing is, if you read like in literature, things broadly classified into two areas. You have fiction and non-fiction. So your
Right.
fiction is basically J.K. Rowling and Stephen King and Neil Gaiman and all these people. Okay, and
Right.
non-fiction are the ones who write about finance books, motivational books and stuff like Robert
Mm-hmm.
Kiyosaki. They are non-fiction, and you have fiction. So these are two different
Right.
categories. Now, if you are a kind of person who's writing a book solely for the with the intentions of educating the population via
Mm-hmm.
facts, right?
Right.
Then you write a non-fiction book, and you need to be completely
Makes
precise about
sense.
what you write. So what I wrote was fiction, and
Right.
the reason why I chose to write fiction rather than non-fiction, two reasons. One, I don't have a PhD in psychology, and two, if you have an important message to
Mm-hmm.
give people, I think the best way to deliver that message is via a story. And I think
Right.
that is why most of our forefathers have chosen different stories to deliver pivotal messages, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like many stories, such as even the Mahabharata, for example,
Uh-huh.
it's a story to mainly deliver important message, and that's actually the kind of uh, tactic even I used. If I want to deliver
Right.
important message, the importance of mental awareness, I delivered it via John Oliver. So
Right.
again, facts are facts. Facts cannot be altered, but they
Right.
can definitely be exacerbated, and that's exactly what I did in my book. it's it is to make sure that things are taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And again, every circumstance mentioned in the book, uh, whether it's a dagger stabbing a person, or a person facing an attack or an accident or whatever, I
Uh-huh.
actually phoned the doctor. I remember calling doctors and asking him, what happens if a car traveling at 60 kilometers per hour hits a person on the bridge? And I actually had a conversation, a bizarre conversation with the doctor, and I told him, how much time does it take for a person to recover from a femur injury, or how much time does it take for a person to recover from a spleen injury? I asked him. I actually asked him these questions, and he thought I
Right.
was crazy. But I wanted to be precise with every injury, every fracture, every dislocation. So I
Right.
tried my level best to be precise with the facts, and I think the readers,
That's
they have been satisfied so far. They have been. Oh, by the way, this book has been read by medical professionals in Kuwait and
uh-huh.
India. The Doctors Forum, and
Correct.
there's even a review
Right.
pasted in front of the book, so it has been reviewed by doctors as well. And I think
Wow.
factually, it's
that's
considered
that's
correct.
a that's a very, very interesting and unique viewpoint that you've given us, because I'm sure you're an avid reader yourself, and all of us read a lot of books, but we never think about the extent the author has to go through to even verify small facets of what he or she or they are writing about. That's very interesting, the amount of effort that goes into even write one chapter. It might extend to months or so. And so along with being a writer and a director, you are also a great musician. You play the mridangam, you play the guitar, so you're a creative genius as good as they come. uh, how do you plan the story? Because as we've already heard, there are so many nuances, so many subplots. Do you keep it all at one place? Do you jot them down on your notebook, or like how do you make sure that you have everything in your place? Because especially as you said, you're writing a fiction, you need to build a world, you need to build your character. So does that come over a day, over a week, or like how long do you spend in building the gray areas of your world and your character?
What I usually do is, since most of my novels are historic historical novels,
Uh-huh.
I make a timeline. I make a
Right.
timeline of the events taking place. For example, the book begins with Bhagat Singh's execution in India, and it ends with, I don't want to tell you what it ends with, but it's alternate fiction. It's alternate history. So
Right.
I think the what I do is I just jot down points. I make a timeline, and I think you really gain a lot of perspective when you actually use pen and paper and make something like a flow chart or a mind map.
Definitely.
It's a very interesting technique you can use to understand concepts. You can draw a
Right.
mind map or different timelines to understand what's happening when, because most of my plots are non-linear. They don't happen in chronological order, so
Right.
timelines they're really helpful.
That's a really great thing to learn. For our listeners, a mind map is where you put a central idea in the center and you kind of branch off trees and put in sub ideas and sub facets of that idea and try to bring it all together. So I think that's a great way to build on what you're like, at least for you to internalize the direction that you're going towards. Now let's talk about plots and story development. You were extremely passionate about history and that's what you write about. uh, is it necessary that everything an author writes about has to be something that he or she is genuinely passionate or curious about? If not, then how do you go around still building a better plot?
That's a tricky question. The thing is, see, in my case, it's not just John Oliver, but even my second novel or my third novel, or even the short story I'm working on, or even the film that I'm directing currently. Most of my work, well, they are character driven. It's the
Right.
character's personality that truly drives the plot. What happens is people, when they sit to write a novel, they're really happy, they're excited, they sit and they just blank because they're trying to come up with a very a novel idea. They're trying to come up with with an extremely unique idea. So for those who are trying to come up with an extremely unique idea, I just want to tell them that
Mhm.
there are billions of people in this world, and I'm pretty sure there's already someone on the other who has already thought of that idea. So it's no use trying to really hunt for that perfect unique idea, because there's no such thing like that. But what
Mhm.
you can do is you can create unique characters. You can become passionate about people. And what
Right.
happens is when you start writing, you attract ideas, you attract people, you attract personalities. And I think once you get inspired by a character, that character will truly write. When people ask me, I'm telling you,
Mhm.
many people have asked me this question, because I think for some reason people didn't expect me to write a book, but they
Uh-huh.
asked me, how did you write this book? And I tell them the characters wrote the story themselves, and that's what
Wow.
happens. So I think if you want to
I
come up with a
think
great plot, just think of a
mhm,
character. Think of really great
that's
books even today. It's the characters
right.
that drive the story.
I think in retrospect, that's a really, really nice thing you point out, because I myself had tried my hand at writing, not a novel, of course, but like short stuff. And I've always looked for a groundbreaking story or an incident. And I think somewhere
Yeah.
down the line I
They don't
never focused
exist.
on the character, because I'm always
They
looking
don't
for that
exist.
big
Yeah.
story or like that kind of but now that I look back, it's always about, it's about the characters like Forrest Gump or like what they represent, which stand out the test of time and history. And I think that's a very good starting point for every all of our listeners, that you always need to find these kind of unique characters and build the nuances of characters, because at the end of the day a human is reading the story, right? He's always going to kind of try to find relativity with the character, or try to find some meaning from the character. So these characters who you develop and who you love so much, are they inspired from people you have actually met in real life, or are they just like, where do you like take at least you take bits and pieces from somewhere? Like, are they from people you have met in real life?
Yeah, everything is from people I've met in real life. Nothing is. See, the thing is, it's not one person. Like if you read Jin Oliver is not one person. It's a
Mm-hmm.
combination of different people, and there are many characters. There are so many characters. In fact, there is this woman I wrote about, and it's just it took me a lot of time to write her because she was this very very complicated woman who is still on a journey to understand herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I know someone like that, but she's bits and pieces of many women I know, and that's what really gave me the passion
Makes
to
her
understand her more and more. It's
right.
you develop a kind of relationship with the characters. It's the more you pick up on traits of people around you, the more real your characters become, and that is mostly what I adopt for writing any story for that matter.
That's a lovely story. The kind of it reminds me about the Imitation Game. I'm pretty sure I've seen that movie on how the relationship with Christopher and how that developed into something great for us. So Sushant, let's just talk about the other side of things, which it goes unspoken for. Like, what were your struggles in this journey? Because I'm sure you as a 19-year-old, it must have been extremely difficult for A, people to take you seriously, but B, for you to kind of compete with authors who are probably 30 and have their own finances, their connections, publishing houses, and stuff like that. What were your struggles along this journey?
Okay, so first struggle was that I was alone. I was in I was in India with my grandmom, and my grandmom is so much older than me, so I can't really talk to her either. And I didn't tell anybody that I was writing a novel. I didn't tell anyone. In fact, I still remember the night I just called up my mother and I told her that I'm sending you a PDF, mom, just go through it. And she opened the PDF and she's scrolling nearly 520 pages. And she asked me, "What is this?" And I told her it's my novel. And she didn't read it at first. She didn't believe it, but it was my novel. She read the prologue and she couldn't believe that it was me. So I didn't really tell anyone. Nobody knew until I released the trailer on Instagram. Nobody knew. So I kind of avoided that problem of people taking me seriously. So that wasn't there.
Wow.
And secondly, against competing with, yeah, I'm telling you, it's very competitive. It's very competitive. Nearly 5,000 uh, books, short stories, or poetry get published on Amazon. So I was actually very happy when my book was the bestseller for 2 weeks. I don't know what happened after that, but it was there for 2 weeks, and I was really really thrilled. Truly, it was a blessing. But trust me, it's so competitive. It's so competitive. People
Mhm.
have such good connections, and not just about connections. There are people with they're too good. They're too good with words, and it'll take a lot of time to reach there. Again, first book. People write first book expecting it to be absolute nonsense. But then when you cross the barrier called first book, things get so
Right.
much more simple. And I think that's what I really focused on with this book. I never expected it to be a
Mhm.
bestseller. I just wanted to cross that barrier, and so that I
Right.
can call a published author and get things moving from there on.
And I think you bring about a really great point on how you worked in silence and you let the success make the noise later on. Uh, about the fact that, initially, I think you felt one of the biggest struggles was that you were alone in this journey and you had to walk this path on your own. I think that's a great place where Tangled comes in, because mentors like you are always available to our learners in Tangled. And I think Tangled being a peer learning platform and a website where people can approach people like you and learn and take from your experiences and help and get guidance in how to crack the blueprint for their careers and their ventures. I think one of the greatest part about the platform is also that it's gamified to enhance the user experience, and we can benefit a lot from people like you. So it's great to have you here and share these amazing stories. So you spoke, we touched a bit upon the publication part. So how was that journey, and what is the general publication scenario you felt in India and in the other countries you have published in?
So the thing is, I so there are two ways you can publish a book. There's traditional publishing and self-publishing. So
All
the
right.
difference between traditional and self-publishing are, and there are many other kinds of publishing. There's even a hybrid of both traditional and self. So I'll tell you what it is. In simple language, traditional publishing is when the publishing firm handles all the cost, but you get a fixed, called a dividend. Okay, you get royalties. You get that.
Right.
Let's say say if your book uh, is a bestseller, it's sold 5 million copies. Okay, you're still going to get the same amount, or maybe a little bit more. Okay, but in self-publishing, you bear all the cost. If your book is a success, you get to take everything. If your book is not a success, if it's a failure, then you need to bear the loss as well. So that is the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing. Now the thing is, there are many traditional publishers, such as Penguin and everything. What they do is, now they know they're going to bear most of the cost, so they're going to make
Right.
sure your book is a success. The only way they can make sure a book is a success is to approach successful authors, which I am
Right.
not. So they will approach, maybe say Chetan Bhagat, or they're approaching Neil Gaiman, or even Priyanka Chopra released a book recently. So
Right.
they'll publish such authors because, come on, they're really popular, and their books are definitely going to be bestsellers. So new authors such as myself, we pick the other option, self-publishing, where we bear all the costs, and if the book is a bestseller, you get to take all the profits. So I think for an author, a debut author, self-publishing is the right way to go about. And once you've written at
Right.
least 5 6 books, you can approach traditional publishing. But self-publishing is actually what everybody does now. Even popular authors such as Amish and Ashwin Sanghi, all of them, they used self-publishing as the first approach to becoming an author.
Wow. So that's something I didn't know. I'm pretty sure most of the people who just listened to this podcast also didn't. So thank you for giving us your valuable insights on what the publishing industry generally looks like and what are the various methods to go about it. That being said, we have spoken about your journey. We have spoken about the industry. We have spoken about publishing. So now, assume me as a listener, I want to get started off. What are my first few steps? Do I need to wait for that big idea to hit me, or do I need to go hit the drawing board and try to come up? Like, give me some steps as to how I get started off to becoming a best-selling author.
There are no steps to, like, in specific to, fine. If you really want to become a best-selling author, don't try to be a best-selling author, because that's the wrong way to go about it. There are many algorithms that will recommend you genres. For example, right now, because of the pandemic, non-fiction is, everyone's reading non-fiction because they find this time to be the best time to gain knowledge on their industry, and they're reading non-fiction right now. So non-fiction is just rising and fiction is going down. So you can actually find these algorithms online and write according to that to become a best-selling author. But I think that's just rubbish, man. If you're writing, I think you should just write what you truly like.
I mean, but what do you think is the most important part about writing a book? Like, what would you say was the most important part about your book? Like, was it the idea? Was it the character? Like, what is that one thing?
The most important part of writing any book is rewriting it. Once you're done writing it, you're going to rewrite the chapters again and again and again. I think I spent more time editing the book than actually writing it, because when you start writing a book,
how different is the final product from your initial draft?
Way different. My initial manuscript was, I think, 520 pages long. I brought it down to 434. I had to cut so many details, and it's, especially if you're a debut author, it's called information dump. You just throw in so many information, so you have to really trim it, and it takes a lot of time. And I spent nearly 1.5 weeks to just write the opening line of the book, because that's like the most important part. I spent nearly 1.5 weeks writing the opening line. And editing I think is the most, rewriting the book is the most important part of writing any book, because you need to strive for perfection whatever you do.
That's very true. What are the two things which every debut author should make sure that they do not do? What are the two learnings from your journey the don'ts?
Don't skip on the rewriting process. That is important.
Okay.
You must pay a lot of attention to you must give time to edit the book. And second
Mm-hmm.
would be what I noticed. One of the most fatal flaws I committed when I was writing my book was I like I know remember we spoke about information dump. Uh,
Right.
I did that when I wrote for the first time. Chapter one, of course, it's not there. If you read my book, you won't find a lot of information dump because I edited it. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens is when you start writing a book, you end up describing the character so much. You even add a lot of cliche structures to your story, like the character describing himself in the mirror. It's so common; everyone writes it. So, of course, I avoided all of that after But then these are a few mistakes I committed at first, and I corrected myself.
Wow.
Then, yeah, I mean, many to be honest. But these are
Cool.
some.
So thank you for those two insights on what not to do for all the aspiring debutant authors who want to get started on their journey. As we come to the end of this podcast, I think it's only fitting to look forward on what's next for you. So you are in the process of writing your next book. You are a much more refined person than when you started off, like back in 2019. You have much more better knowledge, much more better contacts. So how is that journey going on from you? Like, what's next for Sushant?
Yeah, actually, what you said was completely correct. I haven't had a long journey as an author yet. I'm still a very, very, very debut novelist. But with every single page you complete, you become a better writer. And that's just amazing. When you finish your book, when you write the last word of your book, you actually
Mhm.
feel like you've learned a lot. It's not a lot, but you feel like you've learned a lot. Anyways, my next book is again a historical fiction, but this
Mhm.
time, unlike it's not going to be based on London, it's going to be based on India. So when I
Wow.
was in during lockdown, I read a lot of Indian scriptures,
Mhm.
and oh my god, it's amazing. It's so much knowledge. Trust me, it's so much knowledge. We Indians are so smart. And this book it blew my mind. And there was this very interesting concept I came about. It's actually a secret elixir that our Indian scientists used to use, and I'm kind of I stitched a story that a logic that kind of validates many of the monarchs of our planet, like
Mhm. Mhm.
Napoleon or Hitler or Alexander or Cleopatra, why they had so much lust for power and what really drove them to march eastwards. So I kind of
Wow.
wrote a story, and it begins with the 323rd century, ends with present day Kashmir, and it all revolves around this one secret that I discovered when I was reading the scripture. So I think that's what my next book is going to be about. I'm almost done with it. I'll publish it next year.
Wow. That is so interesting. I cannot wait to read that. I'm sure people listening would also really love to read that. We all can go check out your books on Amazon. That being said, it was great talking to Sushant. We spoke about so many interesting things. I'm sure everybody who listened to this learned a lot and they got a lot of inspiration from you. Really amazing to have you here. I enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for coming to Tangle Talks.